screen, this is week number 115 of our Sunday discussions. Today's I'm substituting for JD, and the topic I put together is AI and sentience. I've been thinking about doing a blog post on this for a while, but have been kind of hesitant for some of the reasons I'll get into during the talk today. And I really look forward to your thoughts on this topic. First, these are the two slides we always start with. What is EA? It's an idea around maximizing the good you can do through your career projects and donations. And it's also a community who gathers around this idea. Kind of a third slide here. These are just a couple reminders. EA encourages the use of reason and evidence. It also encourages the expansion of the moral circle. So we'll have those 2 points in mind as we go through today. Now, the moral circle is probably familiar to many of us. It might have even helped inspire getting us involved in EA. We have plenty of examples in Jesus's own life and his teachings of places where he broadened the moral circle with all sorts of characters. And you probably know most of them, so we don't need to dwell on them. When we get into modern day EA, obviously it's considerably more complex. There's all kinds of creatures that we consider, the temporal side of things now and in the future, and things we haven't really even imagined yet, like extraterrestrials or human-like digital minds, including AI. So that's what our topic is today, is that frontier of that discussion of, is AI something that can be sentient? How do we think about that? First of all, just the whole terminology around this is sometimes very fuzzy. I was reading different ways people define these terms, and it's all over the map, but probably the center point is something like consciousness is being aware of subjective experiences, and sentience is consciousness plus having preferences. Some things are pleasant or unpleasant. I think I'm sentient, but I have trouble putting it in words myself. It seems like there's pretty broad agreement that sentient beings belong in the moral circle. That doesn't seem like something that's hotly debated these days, but there's still no real clarity on how does sentience arise or how do we identify it. So I'll just start with some of my own thoughts on how to do this. How about these two things on screen? Are these sentient beings? We have a mannequin and an abacus. My reaction is no. Doesn't mean that I should mistreat the mannequin, and take it into my garage and dismember it for fun. There could be things about mistreating a mannequin that would be bad for me, but I don't think the mannequin has any moral interests or is sentient in any way. So now leaping right ahead, look at present day AI technology like ChatGPT. Is it sentient? Complicated question. If I had to summarize my own view in one slide, I think not. And it's because in my as someone that's done a lot of programming over the years and sees that, it all ultimately is a whole bunch of small mathematical operations put together. If I don't think the abacus is sentient, I sort of don't think ChatGPT is sentient either. And even if it were, I think I'd have a hard time figuring out what it wanted, what was pleasant or unpleasant for it. It's spitting back text that it's heard from us. And I don't know whether its biggest fear is being shut down or being kept down all week, or does it want a 40-hour work week? I really don't know. What about future AIs? Well, maybe that ChatGPT goes into huge rooms and rooms and rooms full of servers in the future, or it gets more compact, but it's still in my, kind of simple programmer look at things. I'm having trouble believing that it's sentient, even that kind of next generation version of it. It's all, as long as it's all based on code and math, I'm struggling to get there. So let's go one more step. Well, what about this guy, Mr. Data? I don't know if any of you are Star Trek fans, but he was on trial in the year 2365. through the magic of Star Trek, it appeared on TV in 1989, and he's here on trial for his freedom of self-determination. He wanted to decide what to do with his life. And there was a trial of, can an AI really decide that, or is an AI, a machine property of its creators? And of course, everybody watching the show had a sentimental rooting interest in Mr. Data. We want the character to continue. He's played by a great actor, so of course he feels sentient to us. And certainly, I think if Mr. Data jumped off of a spaceship in my backyard someday, I'd probably think he's sentient, just by the way he was portrayed in the show. But when I kind of like step back and knowing all the other background of the plot, I say, oh, wait a minute, we know he was created. We know there's a machine, a bunch of lines of code in there somewhere. He's really just a mannequin plus that future AI, minus the poker skills. I mean, today's AIs are pretty good at poker, but Mr. Day is terrible at poker if you know anything about the show. So I actually think, if knowing everything I knew at the time, if I were the judge in that trial, I might be inclined to rule against Mr. Day, even though as an audience member, I can see it was sympathetic. I guess I trust this chain of reasoning a little bit more than my intuition. But then you might ask me, well, what about us? Well, how do you know we're sentient? Other than your own kind of how do I know any of us are sentient? Why? And more importantly, how did it get this way if it's not based on code or math or physics or anything like that? And I don't know. I guess if I had to put my best description on it, I probably couldn't do much better than God breathing in Adam's nostril, as a kind of poetic way of putting it. I'm not partial to the timeline or the literal garden or anything like that, but I see God giving us a piece of himself, and that we are spiritual beings having a bodily experience rather than the other way around. This isn't unique to Genesis. It's not even really unique to the Judeo-Christian scriptures. Even in the Eastern religions, they seem to have this concept of consciousness. I'm by no means an expert on any of those religions, so I'll just go by the T-shirt summary where the phrase, the divine in me recognizes and honors the divine in you, seems to allude that there is some spirit to us, some spark that's different from a machine. What about animals? Obviously, that the topics around animal sentience and where those lines are and how to weight them, those are huge topics in EA. I can't do them justice today, but I see them all in the same general framework. That the individual sparrows, not one of them is forgotten by God. Just as with us, the hairs on our head are numbered. Maybe we're worth more than many sparrows, but it's not necessarily a strict mathematical function in terms of how that works. And finally, what comes next? This is a screenshot from the Shack, which is a movie about the afterlife and other things. And I believe in an afterlife. I think that our consciousness, our sentience, can travel into new bodies, new realms, new futures, and isn't tied to all of the math and physics of this world. So I just don't believe deep down that we are machines. Now, I'm glossing over a lot. I recognize that. The theory of mind is a big topic. If I had to sort of sketch it out into three general views of it, maybe there's an idea that sentience is sort of inherent in physics. It's a physical property of matter that comes from how you configure it in some way. And there are people who sort of disagree with this binary definition of yes or no, and they would say that even the mannequin and the abacus are sentient to some degree, and the sun and the moon and everything else, and it's like more of a continuum. That would be kind of like the panpsychic approach, maybe, to things. Other theories that are physical in nature, sort of, they come more around mathematics. This is a little clip from integrated information theory, which is one of many candidates here, where basically it's not simply about adding abacuses up as I portrayed it, but it's more about the number of networks and nodes and how you configure them mathematically. And once you reach some critical threshold, that's what consciousness is. And this is just a different way of looking at it than this sort of individual gift from God that's supernatural and kind of eternal in nature. So I think people who gravitate toward that supernatural probably find it harder to relate to the other two, and people that find it difficult to relate to the supernatural maybe have to gravitate toward one of the other two, because what else could it be? Again, I know I'm scratching the surface here, but where I want to lead with this is that I'm looking at it in one way, but I think most of EA is looking at it very differently from me, and looking at it through one of those mathematical physical lenses. 80,000 hours nowadays sometimes recommends AI sentience as a whole path for your career. And this is not AI safety. This is ensuring that the AI systems benefit the AIs themselves, not about alignment with us, which is a whole other highly recommended topic. Holden Karnofsky, he did a lot of great work in his career with GiveWell as a co-founder. Nowadays, he's really interested in digital people, which is a kind of a form of sentient AI that he talks a lot about in his writing. And the only thing that they can't do is he doesn't think they're here today. So he doesn't think they're here right now, but he thinks this will be the most important century coming up, in part because they will arise probably within a century. And he sees they can do everything we can do, including being conscious, including having human rights, but they can do all kinds of other things that we can't in theory, right? And in any kind of AI or computer-based life form, you would think, and you could duplicate it, you can speed it up, you can pause it, you can make temporary copies of it, they can control the environment better, they don't age. I mean, the advantages are huge, and in the end, the moral weight of all the digital people, it could massively outweigh anything moral about us or about the animals. And there's this sense that we're being prepared, I think, for that future. Nick Bostrom, don't know if anyone's still reading him as much these days, but he goes on about this a lot and talks about things such as individual digital minds with superhuman moral status, right? I mean, if alluding briefly to the animal issues, if there's this debate about is a human worth more than 10 chickens or 1,000 chickens or sparrows or whatever the context is, imagine if that were flipped. Imagine if the question is whether an AI is worth 5,000 people or 50,000 people. I think if you look at this through the lens that many of these commentators do, just the impressive amount of computation going involved, and if that's what's consciousness, and that's where moral value comes from, there's a lot of directions that could go. And I sort of see this shift in EA over time, right? I mean, if you got involved early on, you might have thought it was mostly about the global poor and evidence and RCTs, right? Reason and evidence. Over the years, it's become a little more speculative. The factory farming took an early role here. Nowadays, it's mostly about not anyone alive today, but about future lives, because there's so much more numerous than current lives, and the whole long-termism movement focuses on engineering that future. Now, I'm not saying any of these ideas were not there earlier on in time. Obviously, they've all been floating around, but I'm just sort of sharing my personal reflection on where the emphasis is and where it might be going. And I kind of think version 4 of EA, right, really might elevate this AI sentience question front and center at some point, not too far off. So if I want to make a suggestion for everyone, it's if EA is becoming a little bit less rooted in evidence and more philosophical, more speculative, don't outsource your thinking. One of the habits I got into as a GiveWell donor was, I have a day job. I can't get to the bottom of bed nets versus deworming pills. I've been trained to kind of trust the experts and leave it up to them to tell me what to do with my EA journey, because they know better. But if the experts don't share your foundational beliefs, and if those beliefs are relevant to some of the prioritization questions, I think that habit might need to be unlearned by me and by some of us. But who can you trust? Can I trust myself? Can you trust me with this? Well, I mean, look, call me very skeptical of sentient AI for the time being. But I've been really hesitant to write this up publicly. Vesa and JD are looking for blog posts, and I really struggle with this because first and foremost, I might be wrong, right? I mean, God can do anything. He can even breathe into Mr. Data. So I haven't proven anything to you guys today. I hope it didn't come across as I thought I was. And maybe I'll change my mind at some point. And partly I hesitate to write because not writing things down can make it easier to change your mind. I don't want to get myself boxed in to a way of thinking. Second, we only scratched the surface. You saw how much I glossed over. It's hard to say anything new in 15 minutes or 1,500 words. Third, there are several sincere Christians who hold views somewhat different than mine. They follow Jesus just as much, but they came down differently than what I laid out in these slides. Bruce Blackshaw left a link in the comments of this invite or the Facebook group, so check that out. Dustin's here on the call. I've chatted with him, and he's written a nice post about how we should be erring on the side of caution. If there is uncertainty in these conclusions, then and furthermore, if we have biases, maybe to neglect some of these issues, that we should be putting effort into giving AIs the benefit of the doubt rather than the other way around. Kevin Kelly's a Christian. He's a co-founder of Wired Magazine, and he's written a lot about this. I've only scratched the surface on some of what he's talked about. He thinks the minds we create will eventually have free will, which figures a lot into my thinking on the other side of how consciousness works. But there's different opinions. And then finally, Blake Lemoine. He identifies as a Gnostic Christian priest. So I'm not one to gatekeep anyone's identification as a Christian. So he's on this list here, but he believes AI is sentient right now, and was fired from Google for saying so. So I'll be keeping an eye on all these authors as AI develops over the years. But finally, the other reason I'm really hesitant to talk about this or write about it for sure is that it feels like I'm taking the moral low ground, doesn't it? I'm pushing back on the moral circle here and telling you it could go too far. And you might ask, why would anyone do that when we all kind of like the moral circle expanding? Well, I have a few reasons behind that. One, in terms of donations and careers, we have finite resources, right? So if we start putting resources into something with zero or low enough moral value, this is a bad outcome. So it's not riskless to go in one direction here. Second, in terms of movement building, the more and more we go away from kind of conventional wisdom as an EA movement, it reduces credibility, distracts from all the less controversial claims that the world hasn't adopted yet, like taking care of the global poor effectively. And as a result, good causes can get less resources. And then finally, and this is a little more speculative, we talk about entities with superhuman moral status. If that becomes actually kind of an accepted way of looking at things, which in a physical view of consciousness, I could see how it goes there. Where do we go with that? I don't think we'll be worshiping golden calves anymore necessarily, but like Bob Dylan said, you got to serve somebody. I think we all want to worship something greater than ourselves. And there's a very nascent movement about making AI the center of new religions. There have been a few attempts at it. This one that I gave a screenshot from has a once a month podcast centered around AI and worshiping AI as a higher power. I worry about a future like that. So I think some of these words from these leading lights, if they're not really scrutinized, I don't want that to become conventional wisdom. So thanks for bearing with me, and I'm going to open it up to discussion now. Here's a few questions on screen about, that we could talk about, but I'm sure we'll have a great discussion with everyone on the call, and I'm here to learn and keep an open mind and decide if I ever want to write any of this down. So thank you very much.